What is up, everyone? This is Before the Box, an F1 podcast. I'm your co-host, Wes McKnight, and I'm joined here with Jack Blackwell. How you doing, man?
Push, 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 push. I'm pumped, man. F1 season's back. Both yourself and I are fairly new to the F1 game. Definitely stoked to be doing this. We have the Bouncing Back podcast, and we've had the opportunity to talk about F1 on there multiple times, but we never felt like we were giving it its true justice. We sat down, we figured out, what can we do to kind of get one step deeper into F1, and here we are. Before the box, an F1 podcast was born, and I'm super pumped, man. Push, 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 push.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. And for all listeners, a little bit about what we're doing here. So this will be one episode a week. All right. So as Jack mentioned earlier, we are the co-host of the Bouncing Back podcast. We wanted to separate that out. So this will be one extra episode from that. It's gonna be all F1. So we're gonna go in quick 30-minute episodes. You can listen on your way to work, or if you live too close, on your way to work and on the way back. But you'll get it all in
Boom.
quickly. We'll release it before test or before practice starts the week of each event, and just give you all a little insight on what we're thinking, trying to break things down a little bit for you all. So I don't want to keep us waiting any longer. I want to get right to the point. So let's kick it off. Preseason testing is done, Jack. It is over, and I am excited. We got new cars. We got exciting driver pairings ready to come in, and I think it's going to be an awesome season. So I'm going to go ahead and let's just kick things off by asking you, what stood out to you the most about the preseason testing up to this point?
Yeah, man. With this year coming in, there were a lot of questions. Brand new builds to these cars. There was questions on how each car was going to run, how the design of that specific car was going to do on the track, and we didn't really get any answers for that any time before the testing. The F1 wanted to keep a lot of that under control. Extremely, there was very limited testing that could be done, and I appreciate that. That's meant to enhance the competition. Keep everybody on a level playing field. Because the thing about F1, historically, if it's something you go back and look into or pay attention to, it almost always benefits whoever has the most money. And so. There's always a conversation that the top tiers or top teams are always going to be the top teams, and so with the new build like this, they really kind of narrowed down the amount of time each team, no matter how much money you had, how much time you could test it and really figure out if what you were doing was the right step. So, just 2 weekends ago, we had our preseason testing and all that, and man, it brought some great questions. I'm definitely excited more now than I was beforehand for this upcoming race this weekend. Just all together craziness from cars going faster than they were expecting. I think what was it, Haas set the fastest lap, things of that nature, and there might be reasons for that, but still, that's they didn't score a single point last year, so to come out and show that their car is running well, it's hard to see how well it is compared to the other cars, just because it was just some preseason testing. I'm sure there were teams that didn't want to go out there and show everything that they had, things of that nature, but it was good to kind of shake things up a bit, see how these teams were going to do, and then on top of that, even with the top teams, you're hearing of some complaints, things that need to be changed, altered, things that, drivers are now running into issues where they never had to deal with in the past. So the new builds, the new cars, it's really going to open the door up, I think. And for someone as new to F1, it's kind of bizarre for me to sit here and say, like, more than ever am I excited for this race this weekend. Just because I've had limited races to get excited about, but I truly am. Just the amount of time we spent kind of diving deep into F1, doing some research, our homework, finding out what the sport's like, how it's been the past 40, 50 years, all that fun stuff. Super excited to see what we get ourselves into this year.
Yeah, man, for sure. And just to kind of let the listeners know some of those changes, a lot of it you're going to have to see visually. So there's a lot of change to the wings, the underbody. One of the biggest changes you'll see is we've bumped up to 18-inch tires. And there's a couple other things. And I encourage you to go to the F1 Instagram and check out where they kind of digest some of these changes in a little more detail, a little more technical detail would be the way to put it. But the cool thing is, all these changes were in mind of closing in the field, so making it more competitive racing. And what's interesting is we're seeing that from the times. So we were at Bahrain last week for the testing, and of course that's where the first race is coming up. But one of the coolest things is if we just kind of run through the time right now, if we look through the whole weekend, so this is all 3 days of testing. Max Verstappen topped the list here with a 1 minute 31 second lap time, followed by Mick Schumacher of
Yep.
Haas coming in with a 1 minute 32 second lap time, and then we have Charles Leclerc, Fernando Alonso, George Russell, Valtteri Bottas, Yuki Tsunoda, Sergio Perez, Lando Norris, Kevin Magnussen from Haas Racing. And I'm just running through half this list right now just to kind of let you all know that it's not the typical names we're seeing at the top. So Lewis Hamilton was actually all the way down. And I don't have the names or the rankings here right beside me, but I had a 1 minute 34 seconds, so much slower. And that's what makes it super interesting. Gets me excited about this season is I think we're going to see closer racing. And how I believe this will shake out personally is I do think we'll still see top teams. Don't get me wrong. There'll be some teams up at the top that are really going for the Constructors' Championship and the Drivers' Championship. But what I think is interesting is typically the last couple years, really last year, it's just been Mercedes and Red Bull. I think it will be at least a four-car or a four um, team race this season. So I think it'll be Red Bull, I think it'll be Mercedes. I think it'll be McLaren and Ferrari from what we've seen to this point. There is a chance McLaren maybe drop them down a tier, but I see those all being tier one teams. And what's cool is I think any driver from that bunch could win any single week. But I think what's more interesting on top of that is yeah, I think we'll see them kind of rise to the top once they're figuring out these cars and they get some of the technical stuff down, and also they're just really skilled drivers. But I believe that there won't be like a second and third, fourth tier below that. I think everyone's going to be in a chunk, man. I think it's just going to be one chunk of teams duking it out. I believe that there will not be a single team that's not scored points when we're looking back at this season at the end of the season. I think every week we'll have different guys going into the top 10. The cars are racier. Like you said, a lot of the teams that struggled in the past years has spent more money and time developing kind of ahead of time on this new generation of cars. So I am super, super excited, man.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're spot on with a lot of what you said. I'll be interested. I have a pretty big feeling that by the end of this racing season, a racing calendar, you're still gonna have Red Bull, like you said, Mercedes up top. Um, I'll be interested to see how a team like Ferrari does. Someone who has long been kind of a front runner in F1, kind of the name of the brand, I'd even argue. You talk about F1 in the past that it's had. It's hard to not talk about Ferrari. I'll be surprised if they don't really pick things up this year. But to your point about the teams farther back, I think you're spot on. You look at last year. Um, a lot of what happened last year, I think, was kind of in preparation for this year. We talk about Haas not scoring a point this year, and yes, I mean, truthfully, they were at the bottom tier, worst of the worst in F1. Um, but that was kind of part of the plan. I mean, everyone in the Haas organization knew, look, we don't really care about this year. We're going to go out, we're going to race, we're going to do what we can, but we're really building up, saving money, putting everything into this 2022 rebuild. And I think it will be interesting. And what's cool is because with the rebuild, you kind of had two things that are kind of played into this kind of change of field aspect. Is one is it's a brand new car, so just in itself, the creation of these cars, being in it for the first time, it's going to take time for these drivers. It's going to take time for these teams to work out the kinks, things of that nature. So just by default, because of that, you're going to have, I think, some equal out as far as the lower tier teams, even as a grand scheme, the whole kind of group there. But what's also interesting is that the new designs for these cars that kind of F1 had went out and prepared is all around making that racing tighter too. the new dynamics of the car and different aspects of it are built specifically so these cars are able to race closer to each other. That it takes a little advantage away from people who are out by a big much. That's one of the biggest things with F1 cars is they say, once you get that lead, you're in clean air, all that, you're kind of good. You just kind of soar on. And so the expectations now are that these cars are being built, not only to serve as the fastest cars on earth in a racing circuit, but also, to make them as competitive as possible. So super excited. You look at testing, you look at some of the stuff we saw during that weekend, how teams were kind of performing so similarly to each other. You talk about teams like Mercedes on the back end there. Sure, Max was up there at the top. But like I said, I don't think everyone came out and put everything out there. I'm sure there were things that were kind of left off the track that day. Maybe the pedal wasn't getting pushed as hard, things of that nature. But this weekend, I think, I don't think all answers are going to get questioned. But I think you're going to start to see some clarity of exactly what this season's going to look like.
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I found very interesting is kind of Mercedes came out themselves and said that, hey, we don't think we have a winning car right now, which is crazy to just hear that from someone that's been so dominant in the sport, an organization that has continued to either to win year after year in the constructors championship. But what they did do is they put in the most laps over testing. So if I know one thing about Mercedes, if they don't have it figured out now, it's not going to take them very long to figure it out. So they actually put in 385 laps over the course of the past few weekends, which is pretty significant compared to some of these other teams. Red Bull's sitting at 320. Haas is only sitting at 240, which is interesting because they had so much success and no one really expected it. But yeah, I'm super excited to see kind of what this turns into. A little bit of a hot take here. I think Charles Leclerc will be for sure in the top three in the driver standings at the end of this year, potentially crack into
Ooh.
the top two. I think Ferrari's the real deal this year. He's a young talent, and he's got that edge to him. So that's one thing you'll see about Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton that I think a lot of the field doesn't have is just kind of that competitiveness to go in and say, "Hey, I'm going to win. I'm here. I'm going to make sure things happen and really just be successful." And he has that, but the cars the past few years have not held up that Ferrari's giving him. But I think this is the year. I think right now they're the front runners, one of the front runners coming in with the quality of cars. They have the money. I think Leclerc will be sitting there top three at the end of the season.
No, definitely. I think it's very possible. Like I said, you take a team like Ferrari, who's been kind of a staple of what F1 is, and then you look at the past few years kind of fallen off. I think they're a team who would want to take advantage of the rebuild more than probably anybody else, just because, they had that seat, they had that throne, and it's kind of been stripped away from them the past few years. So definitely, I think that's kind of where expectation wise, I think I'm on board with you. I probably expect the most out of them just because, if they don't get it right now, who knows when they will. And
Yep,
so this is a huge chance for them to kind of get back up into that conversation of who's the best. Unfortunately, we'll talk, I'm sure, a lot throughout this year and everything about, you know, our drivers and who we cheer for a little more than others, things of that nature. Both of us being pretty new, I think for the most part, we're pretty open and we don't have huge favorites. But I can tell you, I quickly kind of started revolving around Daniel Ricciardo, for McLaren. And McLaren's biggest battle right now is for sure with Ferrari. So I'm a little worried that, maybe my boy Danny Rick isn't going to be able to compete as well with people like Charles Leclerc. But I think it will be interesting, man. And I think we'll know this weekend. Like I said, there's still a lot to kind of, there are a lot of T's to be crossed, a lot of I's to be dotted, a lot of stuff to be finished here. So I'm not saying that after this weekend, we're going to have a clear cut on who's going to be at the top, who's going to be on the bottom, things of that nature. But I think it will start to develop the picture of kind of where people will fall for the most part.
for sure. So as we've kind of alluded to a couple times now, first race this weekend, the Gulf Air Bahrain Grand Prix. So practice starts Friday. and that's at 8 a.m. Eastern time, and basically is throughout the morning there. We'll come up the next day on Saturday. Testing will our practice will be at 8 a.m. followed by qualifying at 11 a.m. Eastern time, and then Sunday, March 20th, is the Grand Prix day. So starts at 11 a.m. So I think Jack, the best way to approach this is let's actually start from the back of the field and kind of work our way up, just talking through, and we can keep it at teams. We don't have to go every driver specific. But what team do you think will struggle the most this weekend? And if we, without any big wrecks or anything that makes anyone retire a car, who do you think will kind of be at the tail end, finishing up on Sunday?
Yeah, from kind of a team standpoint, and I hate saying this, and I'm hoping that this isn't kind of a trend throughout the season. I think you would kind of be foolish to not see Haas at the very bottom of that, and I say that for one reason. Yes, they had great testing and everything. You know the Haas, one of their drivers was Mazepin, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's a Russian, and with all the conflict going on with Ukraine and whatnot, he was not able to compete this year, and so they kind of had to do some rushing around to fill that seat. And so just I think a couple days ago, if that. They announced that they signed Kevin Magnussen, which is interesting because it's a couple year contract. I would think that would be something more short term. But they signed him on, so that's everybody's new in these cars, so maybe it won't play into that big of an impact. But that's someone who's kind of been out of F1 for a couple years. I'll be interested to see him getting back into the car on such a short notice, and seeing what they're able to do. Now, like you said, Mick Schumacher had a hell of a day not too long ago, so maybe he's able to kind of pick up the slack, and maybe Kevin Magnussen doesn't do too bad. But I just, when you look at the very bottom, that's just kind of who I would assume would kind of be there.
Yeah, it's funny though. I don't agree with you at all on this, to be honest. And coming out and surprised our new audience, Jack and I don't always agree, and this is one that I definitely disagree with you on. I think it would be different if Magnuson was not coming in, not already spending multiple years with the organization. All right, so he's been with the Haas team for 2 years, I believe,
Right.
before 20. So I believe it was 2019 and 2020, um, and really where he had some success. I mean, it didn't end up working out, and Haas moved on from him for some young talent in 2021. But you can't say he was a slouch of a driver. Back in that time period, I mean, Haas was a mid pack driver going for
Right.
points every single week. He's
Hmm.
no surprise to the game here. I think he's going to step in and do just fine. And I think Haas as a whole, they just have a better car. And I know it was just preseason testing, so you don't want to look too much into it. But if you look at Schumacher getting second out of everyone, I mean, I think Haas is the real deal. I think they came in, they spent a couple years developing. Are they going to win the constructors championship? No, they're not. But do I think they're at the bottom? No way. I think they're a mid-pack team for sure. So to me, there's two teams that kind of really stand out that I think will probably struggle the most this weekend. The first one's Williams by
Yep.
far. They were the only team that really could not find any success with either driver. So it wasn't
Mhm.
just okay, one driver was off. As a whole, the car did not look good. They were struggling the entire week. So to me, they're at the bottom. So Alex Albon, I want him to do well. Same thing with Latifi. But I just don't see them having a whole lot of success this weekend. So to me, they're the obvious bottom. And then
Yeah.
from there, I think Romeo, sorry, will struggle as well. I know they brought in Bottas, and so they brought in some really good talent. He had a fast time, but if you pay attention to the preseason testing, their car could not hold up. It broke down all weekend long.
Hmm.
And they're going to continue to struggle with that going this week. So to me, those are the bottom two picks. And then I would even throw, and I'll go to my third. I would throw Alpine in before Haas. So that's kind of where my head's out right now, team wise.
Yeah, I think the other names. I don't think you look at a guy like Valerie Botas. I think he'll do just fine in that Alfa Romeo. Sure, I think they were testing a lot of things during that weekend. I kind of would expect things to break down a lot. I don't think they'll suffer as much as you might think. I do agree with Williams. I think Williams will be down there with them as well. It's interesting with AlphaTauri because I really like Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly. With Yuki Tsunoda, I think this is his second year in, and I didn't think he did terrible last year. I watched some of the races, and what I kind of got from him is he was someone who was willing to push the limits. I
Hmm.
think he didn't mind sticking those corners a little rougher, or anything like that. And I don't think it worked out, but for a rookie in the league, I kind of like that out of him. So I'm interested to see how he does. Pierre Gasly, I don't think is too bad either. I think him more on the kind of the reserve side. He's going to go out there and he's going to give you a good drive, but it's not going to be the most competitive. But it's going to be good. So I'll be interested how they do. But I think it would be. I'm under the impression that Haas is still going to be in that category. But I guess we'll just kind of have to see how things kind of to roll out.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned Gasly. I actually think the guy's got some potential. It's interesting because I think people think down on him because of that Red Bull ride, where then he got kind of demoted back down. But he's had some success. But I'm kind of with you. I think they'll also be kind of in that mid pack. Is just kind of what I'm expecting at this point. But I think what's interesting from there is you go into some teams that I mean, you have Aston Martin, sorry, that's got Sebastian Vettel, and I think he'll find some success this coming up this weekend. Potentially be top 10. I think we're getting to the point now where we could see a lot of these teams kind of cracking that top 10 threshold. It really just doing very well, but they're kind of rounding up. That would probably be my fifth place team, I would say at this point.
Okay.
And then we have the big four above that we've already mentioned. So left. So we have Mercedes, Red Bull, Ferrari, and McLaren, which I think is interesting to kind of to break these four down and really look at who are you thinking uh, kind of comes in last place team wise out of these four.
Unfortunately, like I said, I think you got to do it with McLaren. I think with McLaren, there's kind of too many questions to be had. I talk about being a fan of Daniel Ricciardo. Um, I think Daniel Ricciardo is a good driver. I don't think he's actually as good as Lando Norris. I think Lando Norris has a bit of an edge. So if I'm seeing a push from McLaren, I think at the end of the day it would probably be from Norris. But I don't know. I really I'm not sure what to expect from them just because I feel like they've been dangling in this spot where it's like, you know, they're kind of mentioned up there with the big dogs, but they're not quite a big dog themselves. They're still
Hmm.
working on it. I mean, you talk a team like McLaren, let's not get it wrong. It's another team who's been, very well in the conversation of one of the best F1 teams that's been around since the beginning, or however long they've been in F1. But just the past couple of years, from what I've been able to tell and what I've been able to see and watch, they've kind of fallen off from that, and they're struggling to get back on. Now, who knows? This rebuild, maybe it's what they needed. Maybe it's what they needed to get back up there in the fight for 1, 2, three, whatnot. But a lot of questions to be had. So going into the season, I'd put them at the 4 team. Um, and then I would have Ferrari right in front of them. Although, like I said, I think I think you're right about Charles Leclerc. I think he's going to have a good year, and I definitely see. Uh, I do see Ferrari kind of taking that 3 spot
Hmm.
pretty
Yeah.
well, pretty easily.
Cool. Yeah, so it's interesting. I think going this weekend, I think they'll be driver wise. I think they'll definitely McLaren, in my opinion, Mercedes will be mixed in for this kind of 6 to 8 range. So the way I kind of want to, I'm thinking about this is, unfortunately, I think Ricardo will be kind of the last out of that group and potentially might have a really bad day, to be honest. Just with him not spending time in the car testing
Right.
because of COVID, a couple other things. So I could see him dropping down. But Norris had some success here last year. I believe he finished up fifth in the Grand Prix, fourth in the Grand Prix. McLaren's car doesn't look terrible. My personal take right now is George Russell would be the last out of that group. Above him would be Norris, and then above him would be Lewis Hamilton. As I think that's how it kind of shapes up, and to me that would be 5, 6, 7. It's kind of what my thought process right there. So that's where I think they'll end up at the end of the race this weekend, and then I have Ferrari and Red Bull duking it out at the top four spots.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I would have to just from the jump say I disagree. I don't care if you put Lewis Hamilton out there in a golf cart. He's going to figure out a way to get into that top five, and I think he's going to be there. I don't care what issues they're having with the car. I don't care. It's shaking around a bit. The chassis isn't great. The wheels are in the way. I don't care what it is. Lewis Hamilton is Lewis Hamilton. Watch this guy all last year, I'm sold. I don't need to see more. I can go back and watch all the documentaries and races that I want. This guy is a legend, and I'm on board for it. So I don't want to hear the blasphemy that he's going to be below five. He'll be up there. Now, where I would kind of argue with you, I actually think Lando Norris, as long as the car holds up, has a very good opportunity to finish in front of Carlos Sainz.
Mm-hmm.
Carlos Sainz is a good driver. I think he's another guy who gets the job done. He kind of can can do as well as the car can do. He'll go out there and make the turns he needs to. He never has been one who I have thought really kind of pushed the envelope, or would willing to kind of risk that extra little bit to get a little more. And I think Lando would. I think Lando knows that he's in a position where he could compete. As long as the car lets him able to, I think he could get up there. So I wouldn't be surprised at that. When I look at the tops, uh, you know, I'm not completely sold that George Russell is going to come out here and be top three yet. I think he's a great driver. I think you look at what he did for the Williams team last year; it's actually kind of amazing, but I don't know if he starts out that hot. I think it's going to take him some time. I will tell you this: I would almost guarantee Lewis Hamilton finishes in front of George Russell this race. Outside of that, though, I will say I do think Red Bull is going to take this one easy. I see Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez coming out of this at the 1-2 spot. I see those guys as getting to the point. I mean, obviously everyone saw Max last year. Probably saw Perez too. Very comfortable for where they are. Sure, they're in a new card, but as far as anybody else on the grid, I'm most comfortable what they're along with Lewis Hamilton, obviously, but most comfortable on what they'll be able to come out and do with what they're given.
Awesome. Yeah, so me personally, I'm right there with you, but I know I mentioned earlier, Charles Leclerc gets number one here. He comes out and wins this week, followed by Max Verstappen is kind of my pick going in. So that's kind of where my head's at, and maybe I'm just wishing for some chaos right off the bat. Kind of want to see if we can get someone new on the throne, or at least someone up new in the top three. But Ferraris look good. I think this would be a really fun race to watch. So I'm super excited for this weekend for sure. But next segment of the show. So to end things off every week, Jack and I we like betting. We like gambling a little bit. So
Got to.
we are actually going to make some bets to end every show prior to the race this week. So how this is going to work is we're going to take who we think is going to win the race, and we're going to place money on them making it to the podium. Okay. So we got the odds right here in front of us. So for me this week, it'd be Charles Leclerc. And then for Jack, it'll be Max Verstappen. Those are easy. But what's fun is we're also going to pick a third driver. And we might have some fun here. And we're just going to go back and forth and debate who we think that third driver will be. And we're going to bet some money on them. So if we kind of look at the two we already had, we had Max Verstappen at minus 330. And then Charles Leclerc at minus 100 and 110. So for number three, though, so you said you think Signs is going to be up on the podium.
No,
Um,
I do not. I do not think Signs will. I think if
oh,
if I were going to pick a number three before Signs, I would absolutely put Lando Norris. I'd probably put Perez before both of them.
yeah.
But if we're looking to get a little exciting, I would have Lando Norris up there as a three. I think that could be interesting.
So Lando Norris is at plus 650. I'm kind of
Yeah.
interested in that as well.
Right.
He finished fourth last season
Hmm.
in this exact Grand Prix. I love it. I think he's a sleeper pick. I think there's
Beautiful.
no question he has a shot at making the podium this weekend. So I'm good with locking that in if you are.
Absolutely. Let's do it.
All right, cool. So that's all we got for this week. Thank you all for listening in. Jack, you got anything to close out the show?
Push, 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 push. Box. That's
Cool.
it. Thanks.
Yep. See you next week.